Excellency Ambassadors, welcome to the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for a roundtable discussion with the European Union Special Envoy for the Indo-Pacific. I first of all have the great honor to invite Dr. Phạm Lan Dung, Acting President of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, to deliver the welcoming remark and introduction. Madam Dung, you have the floor.
His Excellency Gabriele Visentin, the European Union Special Envoy for the Indo-Pacific, His Excellency Giorgio Alberti, Head of the EU Delegation to Vietnam, Excellency Ambassadors, distinguished guests, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome you to the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for the roundtable discussion with Mr. Gabriel Visentin, the European Union Special Envoy for the Indo-Pacific, co-hosted by the DAV and the EU Delegation to Vietnam. This event is an official platform to directly discuss with Special Envoy and experts from the EU about the EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, which the President of the European Commission and the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy adopted in September. With that, I hope that we can have an open and in-depth discussion about a subject that has been capturing regional attention in the past few months. From Vietnam's standpoint, we always welcome initiatives aiming at promoting regional peace, prosperity, and stability undertaken on the basis of international law. Therefore, we hope that the new EU strategy in this discussion with Mr. Visentin can help foster a more substantial EU-Vietnam relations. On this occasion, I would also like to send our gratitude to numerous diplomatic missions in Vietnam for accompanying us, not only in our academic events, but also in creating a multicultural environment right at the heart of the DAV. The venue for our event today in DAV News Building, named the Geneva Conference Room, was designed and constructed with the contribution from the Switzerland government through the Swiss Embassy as a symbol of Vietnam-Switzerland 50-year bilateral relations. I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere thanks to Ambassador Ivo Sieber, the close friend of our DAV, who, for his enthusiasm and hard work to support this joint project throughout the year. We choose this venue as a celebration of DAV international spirit, open communication, belief in academic development, and hope for stronger cooperation with you all. We welcome initiatives from all diplomatic missions and other agencies. Finally, I would like to express the warmest thanks to our Vietnamese colleagues, students, participants online and offline. We look forward to receiving your support for our future projects and seeing you all here in person soon. And now, may I invite His Excellency Ambassador Giorgio Alberti, Head of the EU Delegation to Vietnam, to deliver opening speech, please.
Thank you, Dr. Phạm Lan Dung, Acting President of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, dear colleagues, dear friends. It's a real pleasure for me being here today, and know also that this is the first official event of this Diplomatic Academy of Vienna, of this room. So thanks also to Ivo Siebel, Ambassador of Switzerland, of course. He's not in the EU yet, but you know, we are close friends anyway, so almost there. And I mean, I'm really happy that we can have this discussion today. I think the first meeting in such a beautiful room on the EU strategy on cooperation in Indo-Pacific, I think it's something very relevant to us. As you know, we have been working on this strategy for quite a long time. As you know, we are 27 member states, so we need always some discussion before we agree on anything. But still, I think at the end, it's something really which goes in the right direction. As you know, there were a number of countries within the European Union that had already their strategy, so I think this is an important work that lasted some time, but it's really relevant for all we are doing right now. I don't have, of course, here to dwell on the importance of the Indo-Pacific, on the area, and of course, in this context, also the importance of Vietnam. We all know it, and that's why also we are here. I'm very pleased as well to have Gabriele Visentin. I think this is one of these first official event in his new role as a special envoy, to have him here with us. Of course, when we were talking a few weeks ago, we were thinking about the idea of coming here, but it's not feasible in the immediate future. So I'm sure that you'll be able to come in the next months, maybe next year. But for the time being, I think it was important anyway to start this process with this virtual conference. Gabriele has been with the European institutions for a very long time. He's a very experienced colleague. He has been working for different institutions as well. He has been also dealing with civilian crisis management. He was head of cabinet and last president of European Community, still in coal. And he had various other roles, and particularly was the head of the Parliamentary Affairs Division at External Action Service. So he knows a lot also about the political situation, about the parliament, how it works. And I think it means a lot also in terms of negotiation and all these things. So he has a lot of experience, and I think will be an excellent envoy in trying to explain a little bit what the strategy is and what it entails for us, for you, for our partners. So I'm sure that this will be a good opportunity also for him also to have some maybe exchange with you. I think their idea is not just to have a presentation, but also to have a discussion. So I really hope that after his presentation will be room for some discussion with all of you. And I will stop there because I think it's most important to hear from him than not from me. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Phạm Lang Dung and Excellency Giorgio Alibiti. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to invite the presentation from Excellency Mr. Gabriele Visentin, the European Union Special Envoy for the Indo-Pacific. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very, very much for the floor, but above all for the invitation. Thank you very much for having organized such an important event with such a high level of attendees. So many thanks for the introductory remarks. My friend Giorgio, nice to see you, thanks a lot. And also Dr. Lanzung, thank you very much. And for the Diplomatic Academy as such. Indeed, this is one of my very first public appearances in the Indo-Pacific region. And I am particularly happy to do it with the Vietnam Diplomatic Academy, because Vietnam is, that has the most comprehensive relationship with the EU, more than any other country in the region. We have a number of agreements ongoing, so we can talk about the PCA, the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement since 2016. We have already expanded the scope to areas such as environment, energy, science, and technology. Then the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement in force since 2020. So this makes it really the core business of the agreement, but we should not also forget the voluntary partnership agreement on forest law enforcement, the framework participation agreement for the CSDP missions, because you will see when I will present the strategy, the security and defense part is a very important part of it. So the fact that you have a framework participation agreement with the EU is already a very important building block. And then the investment protection agreement, which is under ratification. So this makes Vietnam as really the most the country with the most comprehensive set of relationship. And I would like to underline the fact that the EU strategy will not change the bilateral relations that the EU has with each country. So the EU strategy will not substitute for the EU's policy for Vietnam, the EU's policy for Korea, the EU's policies for Japan. The EU strategy will simply put under a strategic umbrella, under an overarching umbrella, all the various policies that the EU has and is developing in the region. So this strategy will not substitute the kind of relations. It will only try to deepen and further enhance the relationships that we already enjoy bilaterally. So this to say that Vietnam is already at the very forefront in what we call like-minded and preferential partners. Having said that, now let's go a little bit on the EU strategy as such. I will not go very much into details because it's a public document. Very likely all of you have already had access to it. So just let me sketch the broad lines of this, so we will have maybe more time for the question and answers. So why have we come up with the strategy? The Indo-Pacific is the future. The world's center of gravity has tilted toward it, both in geoeconomic and political terms. So some figures to make this point. The Indo-Pacific creates 60% of global GDP. It's the second largest destination for EU exports, and 40% of the overall trade towards the EU passes through the Indo-Pacific. Also, the EU is a resident actor in the Indo-Pacific, and we should never forget this, because over 2 million EU citizens live on EU soil in the region. And it's not just a European citizens diaspora, it's really EU's citizens living on EU soil, basically French, but this makes a resident actor. So it's a very important aspect to underline. Then, the number which I like the most to underline the rising importance of the Indo-Pacific in the next 10 years is that by 2030, around 2.4 billion people will become members of the middle class, will exit poverty status and enter middle class. And the 90% of this 2.4 billion will come from Indo-Pacific. So there will be a huge economic development and distribution of wealth in the Indo-Pacific. And this is a clear key to the interest of the EU. Now, amid all this dynamism in economic terms, we cannot shy away from the fact that the regional order is increasingly challenged. The geopolitical competition is intensifying, and we see consequences of this all over the world, but most sharply in the Indo-Pacific. We have conflicts over land and maritime borders, and also a lack of trust among the main players. So, as an EU, we have a vital interest that the regional order remains open and rules-based, international rules-based order. And we have a big stake in the region's future. And we believe a big contribution to make. So this is recognized by our partners. who view the EU as a trusted, consistent, and reliable long-term partner. And the fact that, for example, I just mentioned the big number of agreements that we have with Vietnam is an evidence of the fact that we are seen as a trustworthy partner in the long run. So we have decided to step up our Indo-Pacific policy, and concretely we have identified 7 priorities areas, for which I will tell you more in detail at the end of my presentation. I just tell you now that there are 7 pillars. One is sustainable and inclusive prosperity. 2nd, green transition. 3rd, ocean governance. 4th, digital governance and partnership. 5th, connectivity. 6th, security and defense. And 7th, human security. I will give you a couple of explanations on each of these chapters later, a little bit later in the presentation. Now, we obviously favor a rules-based approach in every field. And as the President of the Commission said in her speech on the State of the Union, which presented for the first time the EU strategy, we want to build links but not dependencies when we establish cooperation. And this goes in every field, and specifically when we will see our implementation of policy on connectivity. The big novelty is the fact that, not the big novelty, the key feature of the EU strategy is that it is inclusive to all our partners wishing to cooperate with the EU. The Indo-Pacific for us stretches from the east coast of Africa to the Pacific and includes China. And on many areas, such as climate and biodiversity, the cooperation with all partners is essential. And our strategy is one of cooperation and not confrontation. Who wants to cooperate with us is welcome, according that this is done respecting rules and international-based order rules. So cooperation and not confrontation. And the strategy is also about scaling up and diversifying our political and economic partnerships across the Indo-Pacific. We want to uphold international law, and this is basically the key for healthy cooperation. International rules-based order. So these are the overarching principles and the main reasons why we have established the strategy. Under this strategy, as I said, we have 7 priorities, all of which are of high interest to Vietnam, and I'm sure that we will find ways to further our cooperation. So just let me quickly go back to what I had announced a couple of minutes before. So the 7 chapters. The first is the sustainable and inclusive prosperity. This is the part where we highlight the interest of strengthening our cooperation on trade relations, on the reinforcement of value chains, and its strengthening and its diversification. In here, we would like to implement the existing trade agreement, which is obviously the case for the Vietnam trade agreement, then finalize ongoing trade negotiations and develop cooperation also with in strategic sectors, not necessarily ending up with free trade agreements. Of course, in this, we highlight the importance of strengthening the rules to protect international trade against unfair practices. Then the second chapter is green transition, well, where we will work with partners and intensify our already existing work with partners to fight, mitigate, and adapt to climate change and to counter biodiversity loss and pollution. Then the third is ocean governance, which is key. And in the strengthening ocean governance in the region, we will seek full compliance with international law, in particular UNCLOS. And the importance of UNCLOS is clearly spelled in the strategy. This is an international rules-based order, and we see it as a key feature of our basis, to secure the freedom of navigation. Then the second part of the ocean governance chapter deals with the support to the partners against the illegal fishing and the implementation of the sustainable fisheries partnership agreements. The fourth chapter is digital governance and partnerships. So we will try to expand the network of digital partnerships with our partners and also explore new digital partnerships agreements. Under this, a very important avenue for strengthening cooperation is the research and development part. It will be paramount for us to further deepen the participation of our technologically advanced partners in the research and development activities of the Union under Horizon Europe program. And this will be one of the main main avenues to explore in the short term with the advanced partners of the region. Then we have the fifth chapter, which is connectivity. On this, I will not go very much in detail. I would simply like to say that we will promote all dimensions of connectivity within the Pacific partners, everything from transport to energy. And there will be also a lot of work to do for the establishment of good regulatory environment and facilitate the funding to improve the connectivity on the ground between Europe and Indo-Pacific. On this, I would like to inform you that the European Commission will issue a new communication on connectivity, which will be called Global Gateway, around the end of November. And this will identify better the policy of the EU on connectivity. It will spell out the kind of cooperation that should exist between the EU budget, financial institutions, national development agencies, and also third countries' development agencies or industrial partners who want to participate. And it will really create a major step up in the EU's policy on connectivity. But for this, we will have to wait another month or so. So I already invite you to organize a meeting on the new policy of the Union on connectivity, maybe when it's issued, and I will be gladly participate. Then the sixth chapter, and this is the biggest novelty of the Indo-Pacific strategy, because it's the first time where a joint communication has a chapter on this, or even mentions the word security and defense. So why has this been added? Because we as EU want to promote an open and rules-based regional security architecture, including securing the sea lines of communication, investing on capacity building, and enhancing the naval presence in the Indo-Pacific. So we will explore ways to ensure an enhanced naval deployment by EU member states in the region, but also support Indo-Pacific partners' capacity to ensure maritime security, facilitate capacity building for partners to tackle cybercrime, and also to really undergo joint naval exercises or enhance the participation of the third countries in our CSDP mission. As I said, Vietnam already has a framework participation agreement for CSDP missions. We are very happy to note that a couple of Vietnamese officials will soon join one or two of our CSDP missions, but of course, for the Indo-Pacific, we have the Atalanta, UNAFOR Atalanta naval mission, On UNAFOR, we have already had some joint exercises with some navies of the region. So I see big possibilities also for undertaking joint naval exercises whenever this is the common will. Then, last but surely not least, the chapter on human security. Under this, we will support healthcare systems and, of course, pandemic preparedness for all the members of the region. We will continue, of course, to be one of the major sponsors of COVAX and encourage the export of vaccines and the donation of vaccines, anti-COVID-19, of course. Then, still under human security, we have decided to add a very important novelty, which is the reinforcement of the EU's disaster risk reduction and preparedness engagement in the Indo-Pacific. We would like to step up our capacity to intervene in terms of humanitarian aid and rescue following natural disasters, but also the capacity of monitoring the disasters themselves. So we are thinking about the use also of satellite technologies like Copernicus, and also to enhance the cooperation with advanced partners on that. But this is definitely a big step up in the let's say mitigation of the results of natural catastrophes. So I think I can stop here in terms of explanation of the strategy. If you allow me to conclude with a slogan, which would summarize all of the 20 minutes I spent in talking to you, for the use of journalists, I could simply say that the EU strategy as a motto has cooperate whenever possible and protect whenever necessary. And on this, I give you back the floor, and I would be happy to take any questions, of course, sharing them with the ambassador to Vietnam, who has the deepest knowledge of the region and the country. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Excellency Gabriele Visentin, for the terrific presentation highlighting the EU's priorities and plans to cooperate with the Indo-Pacific. Now I have the pleasure to invite excellencies and distinguished participants to interact with the Special Envoy of the EU. Please pose your questions directly. Just turn off your microphone and raise the question directly to the Special Envoy. To the participants online, you are welcome to post the question on the Q&A chat box, and I'll read it out for you. Please, anyone would like to raise a question? Well, perhaps while you're thinking, maybe I'll just abuse my moderating role to ask the first question then. Excellency, Mr. Gabriel, you highlighted very clearly why the EU came up with the Indo-Pacific Strategy. I'd like to also ask you, why now? What urged the EU to come up with the Indo-Pacific Strategy at this moment? After all, the Indo-Pacific's importance, rising importance, has been there for a while. But in the couple of years now, several EU member states and the EU as a whole came up with the Indo-Pacific strategies. Can you enlighten us as to the reason why now? Thank you very much.
So, should I answer you immediately or wait for other questions to come?
I believe the others are thinking, so if you can go ahead.
Very good. Why now? That's a good question. So I could answer you with half a joke. Later, better than never. But you said it. there are some EU member states which have developed an Indo-Pacific strategy of their own. Indeed, three of them. We have France, Germany, and the Netherlands. But also other countries have Indo-Pacific policies of their own without having a structured strategy. And 10 member states have explicitly expressed support for the Indo-Pacific attention. Now, you know, the EU has to come out with a sort of a synthesis of what the member states aim to do. So it's the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Union is based on the joint communication, which was published on the 16th of September, but also on the conclusions of the Foreign Affairs Ministers, which were adopted in April 16. Now, I am sorry to maybe bore you with the institutional engineering of the EU, but it is important for you to know that the conclusions of the Foreign Affairs Council are adopted by unanimity of all member states. So this requires some preparatory work, some negotiations at the level of member states, but when they are adopted, they represent all of the member states. So the Council decisions of April then invited the Commission and the High Representative to set up a joint communication on the EU strategy on this. So you have to see the two things together. The member states getting together and deciding some guidelines on the Indo-Pacific in April, and then the Commission and the High Representative condensing this, further developing and presenting a joint communication. So this takes a little bit of time, but it is the acknowledgement of, as I said, the acknowledgement of the importance that the Indo-Pacific has increasingly acquired through the years.
Thank you very much, Excellency. We've received a question from an online participant, and allow me to read it out for you. Thank you very much, Mr. Visetin. My name is Ching Sun Hao, a senior majoring in international law from the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. My question is, has the EU adopted any specific roadmap in cooperation with Vietnam in terms of international law, especially the law of the sea?
I probably have to refer to the ambassador, but to my knowledge, not. We are talking about the multilateral framework. We both recognize the importance of ASEAN and UNCLOS, but up to my best knowledge, we have not entered formal discussions on this, have we?
Thank you very much. Another question online?
I'm to the ambassador for confirmation, if you don't mind.
No, thank you so much. No, of course, this is a good question in terms of also thinking about how to make this more real, now how to implement it. But of course, I think we are not there yet. But I think, I don't know, Gabriel, if you want also maybe elaborate on what is the thinking about what to do next. I mean, how to implement this, how to make these actions more concrete. So I think this is a good question in that sense, but of course, nothing has been done yet. But maybe in the future, there could be something a little bit more practical, so this could be a good avenue also to explore in the future, not to see, to make things more real. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We've got an online person raising her hand, so can I call upon Ms. Vũ Thu Thủy, who raised the hand online, to grab the floor. Vũ Thu Thủy, you now have the floor. Can you just turn on your mic and speak directly? Well, I'd like to move on then. I have another question, and it's a rather provocative one. The question is from Tĩnh Nguyễn, and the question is, you said that the core value of the EU strategy is cooperation. My question is whether the balance of power with major powers in the Indo-Pacific is the hidden target of this strategy, especially related to ocean governance and security and defense.
There's no hidden aim. It's all clearly, it's transparent, and all is written in the strategy. We don't aim at any balance of power. We simply aim at an open, accessible Indo-Pacific region governed by international rules-based order. We don't want to contain. We are not against the rising of any of our partners. We are just aiming at a development and at a cooperation which are respecting the rules and the international based rules order. And this is spelled in many aspects of the strategy. The EU is not a military power, does not have an army of its own, does not have military means at its disposal. The EU only does what the member states allow it to do. And this is a clear message that I want to pass on here. So we are not aiming at becoming a military superpower. We are already, sorry to sound a little bit arrogant, we are an economic superpower, yes. And this is why now, as I said, we try to protect our interests wherever possible.
Thank you. Another question. There is some type of misunderstanding about defense cooperation or intervention from EU to the Indo-Pacific. Can you clarify the differences between EU defense cooperation with the Indo-Pacific and NATO's intervention in the region?
Well, NATO is a military organization and a military alliance. The EU is not a military organization and is not a military alliance. As I said before, the EU does not have means at its disposal. It does what the member states allow it to do. The defense cooperation is a way to project ourselves in the region in an enhanced way. There are possibilities for which are already existing, like the Atalanta Unifor mission is a military naval mission at large of the Aden coast, and it's aimed at having an anti-piracy role. But we can also think of joint exercises with local partners, but definitely we are not thinking about projecting a permanent and constant naval presence in the critical straits or something like that. It's a stepping up of our presence and engagement also in defense. But this is far from being a military permanent deployment with a display of military might.
Thank you very much. Well, now looks like the person online is coming back. Vo Thu Thủy, would you like to speak now?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Visentin and the DAV for these very fruitful presentations and webinar. I am the first secretary of the mission of Vietnam in the EU. We know this webinar on the Facebook of the EU delegations in Hanoi, and if not possible, we do hope to receive the invitation to the missions in the coming time to discuss further the measures to implement successfully this strategy. My questions are first, because our mission is going to work with the Asia PAC 3 of the EEAS to draw a kind of outlines for the implementation, for the suggestion of the implementation of this strategy. So we have a few questions to have the brainstorming process. The first question is, what is the resources of the EU for the implementation of this strategy? Because as we see the strategy, the whole strategy, it is rarely mentioned the resources of the EU for the implementations. Also, the 7 areas of cooperations are quite broad, and to my own opinion, it is a little bit ambitious. So what is the resources for the EU to implement? And the second question is, do you think the bureaucracy process of the EU can have any impact of the implementation of this strategy? Because as we all know that the EU is not a big powers as the US or Japan or something else. So it takes time for the EU for the decision making and to implement any strategy. And the third question is that there are 7 areas of cooperation between the EU and the Indo-Pacific region. So for Vietnam, which areas do you think is most suitable, most appropriate for Vietnam to cooperate with the EU? And which area is we should cooperate with the EU, and which area we should cooperate I think in the kind of 3 parties cooperations between EU, Vietnam, and other partners, maybe an EU members state, because Vietnam enjoyed a wonderful relations with some key member states of the EU, or a kind of 3 parties, multilateral parties cooperation between the EU, for example, an outside partner, Japan and Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chị Thủy, for your question. Excellency, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. Well, implementation is the key, and it's part of my mandate. But it takes 2 to tango. So we are ready to dance, but we need the other partners as well are ready to dance. So definitely, we have to see what is feasible, country per country, region per region. And indeed, the fact that the mission here is ready to interact with headquarters, as you said, Asia-Pac 3, is a very good development. But there are also other ways of interacting and identifying possible areas of cooperation. And it is, of course, with the EU delegations in Vietnam. That's a direct link from the capital to the representative of the EU. So, of course, the 2 strains of communication should go in parallel. But indeed, that's the right method. It's about identifying areas where we can go ahead immediately, medium term, long term. And I would not exclude any of the 7 areas, Mrs. Tutui. The strategy is comprehensive, and all of them are open to the ones who want to engage according to their means, to their like-mindedness, to their capacity. So I would not tell you which of the 7 I favor. I favor all of them, because in all of them, Vietnam can have a very important role to play. Then you said that you think we are too ambitious. Yes, we are ambitious, but we consider ourselves as a geopolitical power. We consider ourselves as an economic and trade superpower. And the fact that we bring together all of our actions, because bear it in mind, none of these 7 activities is new. All of them are existing policies that the EU is already active on. The only novelty is that now they are brought under the same umbrella, and the EU looks at them in a strategic way, comprehensive. So no, it's not an overambitious. It is taking stock of the reality and trying to make the best possible use of what we are doing, and to give ourselves the means to do even more in a smart way. The financing is there. I mean, I invite you to read carefully the last 2 pages of the strategy, page 16 and page 17, chapter 5. Basically, all the financing means are listed, and we always say that the implementation of the strategy will be financed from a number of sources in accordance with its scope. So We have the NDICI, we have the neighborhood, we have Global Europe, we have, now we will have the connectivity. So there are, the various strands are already there, the various budgetary lines are already there, and as I said, the EU Indo-Pacific Strategy brings under the same umbrella the activities that the EU has. So we are not developing a new budgetary line on a new policy. We are bringing under a strategic view what we are already doing.
Thank you. Excellency Alibite, you may add something?
Yeah, thank you. No, just wanted to add a couple of points to this very good question. The first one, as Special Envoy has explained, of course, we have already a number of initiatives, a number of activities. Actually, we have a very rich toolbox. I mean, you can really accuse the EU of many things, but not to have many tools, because we have so many activities going on, and so we can cover really various different sectors. For instance, on the first one, on the green transition and the Green Deal, we are working now the programming for the next 7 years in terms of cooperation. There will be a lot of resources there. There are a lot of resources on human security, on ocean governance, on digital, on many things. So I think the issue of resources is not, I mean, it's not a real issue because the resources are there. Second point, the idea of working with member states. This is already happening. We have this approach which is called Team Europe, where we put together EU institutions and member states. And that's what we are doing also in terms of programming, working together. So this means exactly this. Member states working together with EU institutions, working with third countries. So this is a clear example of how we can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Alibite.
If you allow me, it's a very pertinent point, and thanks a lot, George, for pointing that out, because this strategy is conceived here in Brussels as a Team Europe endeavor. So it's the EU's institutions, but above all, EU member states, which have to both cooperate to make it happen. So indeed, it's a very, very, very good point. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Ambassador Ward of the UK, would you like to take the floor? Please, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Special Envoy for your presentation. And given that the UK is a neighbour and close partner and like-minded partner of the EU, it wouldn't be surprising that in your Indo-Pacific strategy there is very similar analysis and assessment and direction as in our thinking, and I find nothing to disagree with. But my question would be relating to one of the areas you've only touched on briefly. I mean, I think the threat picture that's described in the strategy, hybrid threats, maritime tensions, cyber, refugee crises, and so on, that all leads logically to the focus that you mentioned on defense and security and on ocean governance, and those are areas that the UK as well is concerned about and would like to work on with partners in the region. The section also on sustainability and green growth is something that we welcome very much, and I think is really needed in this region. But my question is about the values section, where you talk about wanting to work with like-minded partners to push back against the undermining of human rights instruments and undermining of democracy in some places in the region. And I was just wondering if you had any more specific areas in mind, because those are also trends that we recognize, and it's important that we feel it's important to stand up for values and the human rights instruments, and maybe there are more detailed initiatives that we could work on together in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Excellency, would you like to respond?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Yes, definitely, we all agree with the like-mindedness of partners in the region and elsewhere, in Europe and in the Western world. on this, let me underline that last week the High Representative traveled to the United States and met with the Secretary of State Blinken, and they announced to step up of, let's say, strategic cooperation with the U.S. So EU-US dialogue on Indo-Pacific was set up. The first meeting will happen in December. This follows the already existing EU-US dialogue on China, and it's very likely that it will be followed as well by a EU-US dialogue on defense and on Russia. So, yes, it's the work with like-minded partners is very, very important. It gives a sense to all. And of course, we welcome as well talks and possible cooperation with our British friends, if you allow me, Ambassador, to say so. And it's paramount. Now for the human rights, this is very much in the DNA of the EU. The reference to the principles and human rights in the strategy is at page 2, even before setting out the priorities areas or talking about possible cooperation. So our engagement is, as we say, principled, and we really defend and promote human rights, rule of law, democracy, respect of minorities, and so on and so forth. And this is clearly spelled out in the let's call it even a preamble of the strategy. Yes, we have already given evidence on how to go ahead. So we have clauses in the trade agreements which oversee the state of the art of the human rights. We also gave ourselves the means to sanction human rights abuses by passing legislation at the end of last year with the Human Rights Global Defense. You will excuse me, I can't remember exactly the naming, but still it is an instrument which allows the EU to sanction perpetrators of violation of human rights all over the world. And we have used this scheme already for various entities in various countries. Let me mention, for example, Belarus, but China as well. And China also retaliated against these sanctions by sanctioning the members of the European Parliament, the subcommittee on human rights of the Parliament, as well as the ambassador of the Political and Security Committee of the Union. So, yes, we have a set of rules which enable us to, let's say, follow on violation of human rights.
Well, I continue to receive questions from online participants, but please, people in the room, if you have any question, please raise your hand. The gentleman from the.
Allow me, can we maybe group a couple of questions so
okay.
It will probably make it easier, 2 or 3 questions, and then I answer.
Yes, certainly, sir.
Thank you very much.
You can ask the question,
yeah.
Gentleman.
First of all, thank you so much for this event. Very insightful was your presentation. I'm a master's student on European affairs, so I would like to ask you 2 questions about the ocean governance. First of all, since the EU strategy of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific was reviewed in April, there is a term what mentioned is the meaningful European naval presence. But in the September official version, the position is strengthened by adding the term enhanced naval deployment by the EU member state. So my question is, how can the countries of Southeast Asia, how can we interpret this modification on term, and how can you understand this EU engagement on naval deployment in this region? And my second question is, in the strategy, the European Union talk about the added value in the region. So my question, what would be the added value in this area of ocean governance that you want to bring in the region? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I would like to follow up with additional questions so you can respond all together. We received a couple of questions on the EU strategy compatibility with that of EU key allies. We've got a question from Mr. Florian Farayaben, a good friend of DAV, by the way. He asked the compatibility and alignment with strategies and approaches of key European Union allies. In particular, I would be interested in knowing how AUKUS or Quad are compatible or conflicting with the EU inclusive approach to the region. And another follow-up and related question is, how would you comment on EU ability to compete or influence the Indo-Pacific against the US and the AUKUS group?
Thank you. Let's start from the last. The EU is not against anybody. The EU strategy is open, comprehensive, and is not willing to create any kind of conflict or tension. It simply aims at cooperating and not at confronting. So cooperation and not confrontation is the key. Now, the EU strategy compatibility alignment with key allies. We already had answers to this, because our key partners in the region have broadly welcomed our strategy openly. I'm talking about the official statements by Japan, India, Indonesia, Vietnam itself. Then the US explicitly welcomed it, Quad welcomed it. So let's say that the key partners and the key allies have already said that this is a framework in which they find themselves comfortable to cooperate with. Now, AUKUS and Quad. AUKUS, as far as we know, it's a military alliance with three like-minded countries, and as I said, the EU is not a military organization. Also, there has not been an invitation to join from the AUKUS. On Quad, yes, there is. Quad welcomed openly the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy, and even our strategy itself mentions explicitly Quad and the possibility of engaging with Quad on issues of common interest. We say climate change, technology, or vaccines, and maybe also defense, but this is really very premature to say. But definitely, there is a will to create the ability to engage and align with key partners. Then the added value of the maritime presence. Indeed, when we talk about the protection of EU's vital interest and we want to project a comprehensive approach, it is important to underline that the freedom of navigation, the access to free navigation in the South China Sea is important. As I said, 40% of the trade going towards EU passes through the Indo-Pacific. So it is a matter of securing the EU's vital interest that this area remains open and accessible. And also the added value of it enhanced really means that the EU should be ready to do more if needed. And that should be read as that. So there is no threat, no escalation, no nothing. It's just a simple consequence of the fact that the EU consider the region as vital for its interest and survival.
Thank you. We have a couple of additional questions. What do you think are the impact of COVID-19 on implementing the strategy? Would it impede the process or forge stronger cooperation for post-COVID recovery? And the second question is the rise of China part of the reason the EU is shifting cooperation to the Indo-Pacific region? In cooperation between the EU and Vietnam in the future, especially in social, economic, and culture, how will disagreements and difficulties be resolved? Thank you very much.
Thank you. The idea is that the implementation of the strategy will be boosted and encouraged by the recovery, the post-COVID-19 recovery. And the fact that we devote the last chapter of the strategy to human security, and in there, the total support for the national healthcare system, to the preparedness to address the pandemics, and continue a total support to COVAX is clear. I would like to underline that the huge contribution that the EU does to COVAX, both bilaterally from each of its member states and from the EU budget itself. It's 1 billion euros from the EU budget itself. And we will surely continue this, and we see it also as a confidence-building measure for the partners in the region. So we are very confident that the COVID-19 will mean a boosting of our relationship, not surely a halting of them. The rise of China, no, it's, as I said, the reason for the Indo-Pacific strategy is not against anybody. It is acknowledging that the Indo-Pacific is central, crucial, and essential in the life of the world nowadays. And therefore, an Indo-Pacific strategy was needed. The EU already has a strategy for China and a strategy for engagement with China. So these are two parallel avenues which are, of course, interlinked in terms of daily life, but are very distinct in terms of policy lines. So no, it's not, and just to make it, I repeat a concept I already said, but probably it's better to say it twice. We are not against the rise of anybody. We are against the rise when this does not respect an international rules-based order. As simple as that.
Thank you very much. An additional question. You mentioned earlier about the global gateway connectivity initiative, if I may say. Would you comment on the complementarity of the global gateway with the Build Back Better World initiative, or the BRI, or the Blue Dot networks? How do all these initiatives work together, or connect, or compete with one another?
Well, it's a bit early to say. We have to see what the document will say, what the policy, the official policy issued by the European Union will be. So allow me to be a bit reticent on this question. But again, the spirit here is not to confront, but is to cooperate. The big work here will be on the regulatory side, and we have multilateral fora where the regulatory side is discussed. So I think that we should concentrate a little bit on the regulatory part. So there is work going on in G7 and G20. So I think this should attract our attention, and that would then pave the way for cooperation on the various strands.
Thank you. I think there is one last question on the similarities and differences between the EU overall strategy on the Indo-Pacific and its member states' strategies, such as that of France or Germany. How would you comment on that?
Yes, I mean, it's, of course, they are similar, compatible, and they don't go one against each other, but they complement each other. As I said, as Giorgio said, it's a Team Europe exercise. So it's the member state jointly with the European institutions. Obviously, there might be some differences in the structure, some differences in the drafting, or in the overall geographical content. So, for example, the French strategy is very much thematic oriented, which looks very much like the one of the EU. The German as well, but the German is much more concentrated on Asia. So it's more geographic than thematic. The Dutch is a bit between the two, and the Dutch is interesting. It's not a strategy, but these are guidelines, and they call about EU's engagement inspired by the Dutch views. It's really a truly sort of national/European piece of work. But they are all. They're not contradicting each other, not at all. There are commonality of interest and views, and the overall aim, be it short, medium, or long term, are the same.
Well, thank you very much, Excellency. Is there any more question from this room? I think there's one gentleman at the back. Huang, would you like to come up to the microphone?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Visentin. So I have, I think, 2 or 3 questions, probably. The first one is that I noticed in the resolutions back in April, the document did not mention the South China Sea at all, but in the new document, the South China Sea is mentioned 3 or 4 times. Does that changes reflect a better consensus, a better maybe a rising awareness among internal debate within the EU regarding the South China Sea? My second question is about some of the new initiatives mentioned in the document, such as the cyber diplomacy network or the digital agreement. I think that I have not seen a clear definitions of these initiatives or the substance of these initiatives in other related documents. Will these initiatives be explored maybe in the follow-up document, like the global gateway that you mentioned earlier?
I don't think he can hear you quite clearly. Would you like to speak again?
Just the last question I did not understand very well.
So I noticed that in the EU document, the document mentioned several new initiatives, such as the cyber diplomacy network and the digital agreement. But I haven't seen the document explore on the substance or the content of the initiative, nor have I seen these content be touched upon in other related documents. So the question is, will those new initiatives be explored on maybe follow-up document like the Global Gateway? Have the EU already decided on that, or these are just the beginning step, just some food for thoughts? And maybe the last one would be also related to internal debate about the importance of the Indo-Pacific. How will the EU sell the ideas of the Indo-Pacifics to countries that are not maybe historically linked to the regions, or countries or member states of the EU that don't have much trade in the regions? And also, how do you sell it to the European public? Because I think, according to a survey that I have found on the European Council of Foreign Relations, the result of the survey is that not many people are aware of the importance. The common people are aware of the importance of the Indo-Pacific. So these are the 3 questions. Thank you so much.
Would you like to respond, Excellency?
Sure. So thank you very much. Very, very interesting questions. The South China Sea, yes, was inserted. The Council conclusions in April are the first step, asking then the Commission and the High Representative to spell out more in details the strategy. This is why you will see that the Council conclusions are, of course, much shorter and much more dense than the joint communication which was published in September. So it's not a contradiction, or it's not, let's say, a change of views. It's more of a declination in better terms, a specification of what the main lines given by the ministers have been. So you should simply see it as a complement, as a follow-up to the April document. It's not a contradicting, or it's not a review of what was adopted in April. It's a follow-up to what was decided in April by the Council. So it's a further specification. This is why you will see more in the joint communication than you would read in the Council conclusions of April. Yes, cyber diplomacy, the context of the partnerships, and so on. Indeed, the joint communication, as you rightly read, is sort of vague, but it gives broad policy lines, and then it will be up to the partners in the region and to the EU to further specify and finalize these partnerships or these agreements. We have digital partnerships, we have connectivity partnerships agreements, which have been negotiated and signed. So that's something that we have to develop, and we have to do on a case-by-case basis with our partners. And then the internal debate. This is, thank you very much. It's a question sort of unexpected from a student from the region. Very well put. Thank you very much. You must be an EU expert. Actually, there is no contradiction, and there is no difference in views amongst member states. Of course, some member states in the north or in the east see themselves a little bit more distant from the Indo-Pacific than other countries. But at the end of the story, to have an EU strategy does not take anything away from anybody. It adds to the interest. And this is why the conclusions of the Indo-Pacific were adopted unanimously by the member states. So the member states acknowledged that there is an interest on having an EU strategy for the Indo-Pacific. Of course, the interest and the involvement of these countries is various. There are some which are more involved than others. But just think about the impact that a problem in the Indo-Pacific or in the supply chain passing through the Indo-Pacific has and affects all member states. When we have the crisis or a shortage of the availability of semiconductors, this does not only affect Germany or Spain, it also affects all the Baltic and the Western countries. When we have a container ship sailing too fast and blocking the Suez canals for days, then the supply chain is interrupted not only for the south of Europe, but also for the north of Europe. So there is an acknowledgement by all member states that the Indo-Pacific matters. And when I say that the Indo-Pacific is vital to use interest, it really is. And every member state now realizes how vital the Indo-Pacific is. So in reality, there's no need to convince anybody. They are all on board, and they are all very much convinced, I assure you.
Well, thank you very much. Any further question? Would you like to have a question? Is there? No. Okay. Well, I think we've exhausted the question. I think you've covered a very large ground. So all of the questions that were posed were adequately and terrifically answered. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time. I'd like to, on behalf of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and all of us here in the room, unfortunately, I don't know if you can see all of us here. We've been listening very carefully to...
Yes, I see you.
Yes, all right. I'd like to, on behalf of all of us here, convey our gratitude to you for your time, for your excellent remarks and presentation, and also for the very informative Q&A session. I do hope that the EU will be very successful in its implementation of the strategy. and we hope to welcome you in person in Vietnam next time, so we can have a direct conversation instead of the cyber one. With that, I'd like to thank you for today's session. I'd like to thank all of Your Excellencies ambassadors for taking the time to join this roundtable. I'd like to thank all the online participants for posing very excellent questions to the Special Envoy. And with that, I would like to draw the roundtable to the conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lamy, I would really like to thank you for having organized this event, for having managed it in such a fantastic way, and thank all the attendees, both in the room and remotely, for their patience and for the active participation. It was really, really interesting also for me, so thank you very much again to everybody.
Thank you very much, Excellency.